Hello class. In this screencast we're going to create a Hello World node application, have it version controlled on GitHub, and then publish it to the cloud on Heroku. So let's go ahead and get started. You are now familiar with Visual Studio. It's a very powerful tool and it's also free, which makes it great for us to use in this class. The first thing I'm going to do is start my organization. So for BYU Idaho, for this semester, I have a brand new blank directory right here called cse341, and I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And now you'll see that here's that folder right there, and it has nothing in it. It's completely empty, but that's what we're going to work on. My terminal popped up. If you don't see the terminal here, there's a simple little keystroke there, the caret and the tick, or you can go and just hit it in the menu. Anyway, that brings up our terminal. In my case, it's the Z shell for Mac. You might have Bash on Linux or C shell, and then on Windows you'll probably have PowerShell and Command, and maybe another option if you've installed a Windows version of Bash. But let's go ahead and make sure that we have our system ready to go. So we have Visual Studio, we have a place to work. Let's make sure that we have our tools that we need. So let's check Node. Yep, Node is working and responding correctly. npm Git and Heroku. Okay, it looks good. Now there are many ways to start your project. I prefer to start them in GitHub. It makes it easier to create that connection between the remote and the local repository. As a review, the local repository is what's on your local machine, and GitHub is a remote repository for your Git repo. So we're going to create a remote repo right here by hitting the green button, and then we're going to name it. Because I'm going to be using this for a lot of this course, I'm going to call it cse341, and we'll just put node behind it right there. I like to personally add the README. It's a good best practice, and it reminds me to add documentation as I need it. Also, I like to start out with one of their git ignore patterns, and they have one templates. They have one for Node, and most importantly, that will mask some of the Node modules that we definitely don't want to push up to our GitHub repositories. So from there, I can create a repository. Now at this point, I've only created the remote repository on GitHub. Out there, the only things I have are the GitHub, the git ignore file, and the readme.md file. So over here under code, I can clone this to my local directory. In other words, I can take a copy of the remote repository and create a local repository that's connected to it. So I'm going to clear the screen here, and I'm going to say git clone, and we'll grab that URL and hit enter. So it went out there and it grabbed the files, and you can see that it created a subfolder here. And underneath that folder, you see the two files, the git ignore and the readme that we have, and we're up to date. Now, one of the most important things to remember is that a lot of the commands that we run are very sensitive to the directory that you run them from. So for example, if I wanted to run Git Status right here, just to see what the status of my Git repository was, it doesn't know what I'm talking about, because when I ran this clone, it created this child directory which is representing my local repository. It's not up at this level. So to see anything interesting or to get information from Git, it needs to find this hidden directory file, which is in that child directory. So let's go ahead and move down there. I'm going to do a quick ls with al so you can see the hidden files, and you'll see that there's also this hidden.git directory right there. So now it has a little bit more of the context. So I can say git status, and it says you're on branch main and you're up to date. So that's looking good. we have the context, we have a Git repository, we have a local Git repository, which is this showing us, and it's also showing us that we are up to date with origin main, which is the remote repository. And so you can see that with git remote -v. So it says you're on branch main, and when it says that, it means on your local repository, and you're up to date with your origin main, which is the GitHub version. So the origin comes from the fact that we cloned it. So we cloned it from a remote. Its origin of our local repository came from that remote repository. Okay, so our Git setup. So we now have a working project, we have a local repository, and we have a remote repository. Let's start now to create our node application. We start with npm init, and if you want to skip all the questions, you can just type -y or --yes, and it will create this package.json. A couple of great things to notice right off the bat is Visual Studio went to work. It immediately saw that this is an untracked file, meaning that our Git repository, our local Git repository, has no knowledge of this file. It's currently unknown. And it shows it up here, and it also shows us in this source control window that there's a pending change, which is we don't have that file in our repository yet. So just as an example, let's go ahead and add it. We'll do it a couple different ways. Let's do this one from the command line. So I'm going to run that Git Status again. And that's telling me that I'm still on the branch main, and I have some untracked files. Now, we want to track this file, but we might not want to track all files. So we could always add something to our ignore list if we wanted to. But for right now, I want to add this file. There's a very simple way to get everything that it currently sees as untracked. You can hit git add dot. And so if I do a Git Status now, you'll notice that, oh, it now knows about this file, and it's now in the local repository. It's staged for our local repository. It's not quite in the local repository yet, but it's ready to go and staged. And so that change, you'll notice up here, there's an A now, meaning it's been added and that it's ready to be put into our local repository. And we do that by doing a commit. So commit -a-m, and I'll just call this the first commit. So we added that one file and we had a few insertions. And you'll notice over here that everything's disappeared. There's nothing under source control. There's no extra annotations around package. We've committed it to our local repository. Now, if we go over and look at our remote repository, you'll see nothing changed. We don't have that package JSON over here. There's nothing there because we only committed it to our local repository. Once we've committed it to the local repository, we can now push it to the remote repository. So git push, and away it goes. And you'll see right there it says main. It actually has the URL to our repository. So now if I go over here and hit refresh, there's our new package.json file. So we've gone through the whole flow using mostly the command line here in the terminal, and you don't have to necessarily do it inside of Visual Studio. All this we're doing here, we could do externally in the terminal also. Okay, so we've got a great place to start for our new application. So I'm going to clear this out, and let's go up here and look at this. I want to stay in line with all of the examples that Brother Birch has been showing you, so I'm going to change that to server.js. Like he mentions, it can be app.js, it can be anything you want. You just have to know what your main file is to start with. And then there's these scripts right here. One of the most common things you see is you see npm start. And what that means is to go into this file and find that script. Now, because there's not a start, it just completely errored out and said, you don't know what you're talking about. So let's try the one that it does have in there, test. And test says error, no test specified. Yeah, and that's true. And that's exactly what it said to do. And exit with code 1 that we can see right there in our terminal. So let's go ahead and I'm going to mimic, let's do a start. And then if one, I don't know if you noticed that, one advantage of some of the type ahead is that it does more than just complete. It sets everything up for the next part. So right there, start, you would think, okay, it'll complete the start for me. But it does more than that. It puts the colon in there and it adds the quotes for my next part, which is very convenient. So we want to do a node server.js. That's what we want our start to be. And so let's go ahead and try that now. And immediately it says, well, there's no server.js. Oh yeah, we have that little problem of actually writing the application itself. So I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to right click and say new file. You'll notice that it just gives me a little spot up here to type in server.js. And then, okay, a little bit of a jump in the video there. Let's go ahead and continue with the simple example you've already seen. We're going to pull in the Express middleware. We have that awesome contextual documentation that's there. Requires Express. Let's put on port 3000. It's going to respond at the root and say hello world. And then we're going to have the application listen on the port 3000. And then if there's any kind of problem, or no, it's actually going to tell us when it succeeds, it's going to tell us what port it's on. So let's go ahead and move forward with that. Hit save. Make sure that little white dot goes away, just because I don't always trust the IDE to do it for me, although it does try. So let's go ahead and try npm start. And it immediately notices you have not done your installation of Express yet. So that's our bad. So we come back and we're going to say npm install, or as it will be, we'll say make sure to save it to our package.json, and we'll install the package Express. And there we go. So now we have the node modules, and you'll notice there's no little marker there anymore. There's no, like right here, we created a new lock file which has our dependencies in it. It mentions it's untracked. We've created this new server untracked, but because of our GitHub ignore, it's not trying to add this folder, and we don't want that folder to go up to GitHub repository. So we're ready to go here. So let's try it one more time. npm start. And we got our command that we said right there, app listening on port 3000. Let's jump over to a browser window and we'll do Heroku, not Heroku, we'll do localhost. Localhost 3000, and we see our hello world. Gonna come back over here and I'm gonna hit Control C, killed it. And so if I come back to here, it's gone. There's no longer a server listening there. We don't have this application listening on port 3000 anymore. So at that point, we're looking pretty good. And in fact, that's actually a good place to kind of wrap up things just a little bit and say that, hey, we've completed a hello world. So let's go ahead and let's actually get it to the point that Brother Birch did. So let's go ahead and include the routing. So if you remember, as we create these things, we're using this as our primary file, but we definitely don't want to put all of our code in just one file. So we're going to use the magic of Express, and we're going to say require.routes. And so that's going to go over there and look into routes. So we need to create a folder. So we'll create a new folder over here. We'll call it routes. And to stay in sync, I'm going to also call the file in here index.js to follow the example you've already seen. And in that index.js, we already talked about the router. And so when we see the slash in this particular file, we're going to say Sarah Birch, which I assume is either Brother Birch's wife or daughter. Actually, I'm not sure. But let's go ahead and try that. Let's be dangerous right here. Reload. It says hello world. So what happened? The thing that happened is this terminal has no knowledge of these files, and neither one of these are saved. They both have the dots there. So I use Command S. There's multiple ways to do that. I have to do that with every file. If you go up to the file, which I don't have in the recording right now, you can say save all. So those are saved. So let's kill it. Control C, and let's start it again. There we go. And if we refresh it, we now have Sarah Birch. So working just like we wanted it. So I'm going to change it just because I want mine to be a little bit different. I'm going to say hello Sarah, exclamation point. So we should see that eventually. Okay, so now we have all this great code, and we want to follow a pattern where every time we make one step, we're committing that code. And so we have a working version here, and list time will go over here. We could do the same thing and say Git Status, and we go through it here too. You'll notice that we modified an already staged file that's being tracked, but these are not being tracked yet. And so we want to add all of those in there. And so right here, we can go ahead and say, oh, these are the changes. And I can say, yep, add them all. And so they went to an A instead of the U that was there before. And you'll also notice it changes here too. And you'll notice that it went deep, and it went, not only did it get routes, but it got the index.js right there. And so we are good to go. So let's go ahead and do a commit. So git commit -a-m, and this is our, at this point we have a working hello Sarah. That's the point that we got to. Again, this commit does not mean that it is in our remote repository. It does mean that it's committed to our local repository. When version control was first introduced, it was just a way on your local machine to keep track of changes. And we've gone from that all the way to a distributed system with Git that is so much more intelligent and so much better for working on teams. But you have to know how it works. And so the commit is just committing it locally. We do a Git Push. Oh, I did it down here last time, didn't I? So we can go over here and we can sync the changes. So this is the same thing as a Git Push. And it says the action will push and pull commits to and from the origin main. So it's going to do a push and a pull. And so we do that. It says it's done. There's no more changes there. Basically, we just did a Git Push. So if I come over here, I should be able to see everything. And so now we've hit a great spot where we have all our code there and we have a working application. At this point, what we want to do is put it into Heroku. So we've achieved the goal of having a hello world, and we have it under a local Git repository and in the GitHub remote repository. So to make this work on Heroku, we do need to make a few other changes. I didn't do the nodemon, but if you did nodemon, you need to be careful about that. I don't have it installed, but if I did a, what word does it like for that? It doesn't have a generic one. So let's just do, actually I'm just gonna take the test because we don't have any tests. So we can say in testing mode, we'll steal this one and we'll say that that one is nodemon server.js. And we need to install it. And we don't need to install it for Heroku. We can just save it for our development environment. So we can say npm install save dev and say this is nodemon. So we install that package. Now I type in npm test. I like using the those features of npm, so I don't use node, but you'll see that it said started node server.js, but it did it from nodemon. And if you look in our dependencies, you'll notice that here's our express dependency, which went on our normal list, and then our dev dependencies is where nodemon is at. So it's up there in listening. The advantage again of nodemon is I come over here and I see that, but I can come back and make a change. So let's make a change here, and we'll do 3 exclamation points. And I'll save that. And now we're going to keep looking here, but you'll notice it said it restarted because you changed a file. So without me hitting Control-C and then starting it again, I can come back over here and I can see all 3 exclamation points. So I'm going to kill that by hitting Control-C here and get the right window. And remember that I'm using these scripts here. So I absconded, which isn't the best. I wouldn't suggest this is a normal pattern, but I grabbed test and to use our nodemon, but start is using the standard node server.js. So first thing that we want to do to make this work on Heroku is it needs a proc file. And the proc file is where we tell Heroku, and in fact you'll see a little, I guess maybe you won't. If you have the material icons, you might see a Heroku icon here. I'm not sure. Actually, be curious if you see those or not. That's one of the extension I have, which is a fun one. It's called Material Icon Theme. And I'm not 100% sure if that's coming from there or if it's coming from my own system. So I will leave that to your exploration of it. So for the proc file, it's really important that it starts out with web. That's what it's looking for. And then we give it the command. And that's where I like to use npm start here. So when I update the the package.json file, it updates it here. So if I'll save that, and we're good to go. We have that. We still have a problem, and let's go ahead and keep the problem in there for right now. So we have all of this here, and I want to commit that. So git commit -a. -a, it simply says if there's any files that you've already added, and so these M's here, just automatically add them to the group that you're going to commit. It's a really easy way to skip that part. And then message, and then we are almost ready for Heroku. And I forgot my double quote. Okay, there we go. So we're there. We now need to do a Git push. I need to spell it correctly. I love how enough people do it the wrong way that they are like, hey, we'll help you out. It's Git push. So Git push by default will go to the origin. In fact, if you do Git push origin and Git push origin main, and then like we did before, the Git push, those are all equivalent. Okay, so now we have this here. So let's go ahead and create a Heroku application to use. Now, again, there's lots of ways of doing this. I'm going to go ahead and come to the dashboard here online, and in a free account like this one right here, you get 5 servers, 5 applications. And so this is an older one, not that old, probably earlier today, but I'm going to delete it because I really don't need it anymore. And so they want you to be really careful, and so they have you type it in. This is very similar to GitHub, and actually Amazon does the same thing, but that lets us do that. So now we want to create a new app, and so our app name is, and it has to be a little bit more finer grained for us because now we're competing against everyone in the world as far as the name. So cse3, let's see, yeah, let's do cse341, and we called it node, and I'll just put, is that available? Yeah, somebody from our class has taken that. That makes sense. Or previous class. So I'll just put my username on the end and create app. And so now I have an app. It's called CS. There's the name of it right there. And some of the other instructions will say, go here and connect to our GitHub, which is an excellent way of doing it, and it's great. Unfortunately, right now, there is this wonderful security issue. So looks like they're scheduling a maintenance at next week. Oh, wait, yeah, a week from now. So hopefully that'll be fixed soon. So they're continuing to investigate this problem when people try to connect to GitHub. So connecting to GitHub is a little bit hit and miss, and it depends on whether or not you've done it before. So I've reset everything, so I can't do it anymore. So I've put myself in the situation that many of you are in. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say use Heroku Git. And what this is this is their remote repository. So they can, a Heroku application can use a GitHub remote repository, and we could have pointed it if they weren't in this down state right now. But since they are in a down state, we can use theirs. The biggest downside on this is that you have to remember to push it both to GitHub and Heroku. We have to do both of those. They're separate. I don't mind typing them both in. That's what we've done in this class for a long time. But some people have created scripts, and you're free to do that. But if we come down here, what we're looking for is we're seeing a number of different ways to install the Heroku. Well, it says install the Heroku CLI, But what we want to do is get connected to this repository, this Git repository that we have. And it says right here, it says git init. We don't need to do a git init. We already have a Heroku, a local Git repository, so we don't need that. What we need is this right here. So this is a Heroku command that will automatically add a remote link to this application's Git repository. So let's go ahead and we're going to copy this over there. And I'm going to come here and make sure I'm in the right directory. And I'm just going to type that in right there. So it said set git remote Heroku to that. So if we do Git Status, it's not going to change. Oh, except I didn't add the proc file. Yeah. How did I forget that? Oh, I didn't do the add, did I? I forgot the add last time. But it's not telling us about Heroku. When you see Heroku, if you do git remote -v, the magic of that command we just did, we still have our origin, but now we also have Heroku. So right here, if I were to type in, I actually don't know what it'll do at this point, Heroku open, it jumped over and it said, hey, here's your new app. And this is not our application, right? It's put something out there that's not what we did. And so what we want to do is put what we created on there. Now we have a couple problems. One of them I actually forgot is this file right here. And the other one I was going to leave in, but we'll go ahead and fix it now since I already forgot that one. Inside of our server.js, because we're on a multi-tenant system, and what that means is we're on a free server in Heroku that's being shared by multiple people, we can't pick which port we can use. And so we have to leave that up to the Heroku server. And so if we use process.env.port, we can get a port that is acceptable for that multi-tenant or shared server. And because this environment variable doesn't exist in our local host, it doesn't interfere. It'll just say, oh, well, port's nothing, so go ahead and continue to use 3000. So in fact, we can look at that really quickly. If we say npm start, it'll say listening on 3000, even though we've added that extra part right there. So at this point, we have the port there. We have this untracked file that I missed from before. And so I'm just going to do a simple git add gid. That probably won't work very well. Add dot. And you'll see that the U moved to an A, so now we're all happy. And to make sure that we get that in there, we'll do a git commit -a-m ready to rock and roll. So we think we're good. We do a git status, and this is telling us that we have a commit that has not been pushed up to the origin main, but that's all it's telling us about. So let's go ahead and do that. Git push, and we could say origin here, or we could just say git push. Either one's the same thing. Defaults to origin, and so our GitHub remote repository is up to date. But if we look at our application, this is not our hello world. So let's go ahead and git push Heroku. Now, the one advantage to this is when you push to Heroku like this, we actually see the whole build event happening, which is very satisfying. and you can do it separately from the GitHub. But I would prefer to have them connected. So for right now, I have to do it twice. I have to push once to GitHub and once to Heroku so that both links work. So when you do your assignment, you're going to return in this link to the GitHub repository. So I'm just going to turn in that one. And then I'm going to also turn in this link, which has my name and my Heroku app. And if I do a refresh, it now has Hello Sarah with 3 exclamation points, just like we wrote it. And so now we're in a happy spot. Even though we couldn't get the GitHub to connect, we do have all of that here. Again, this is because we have multiple remotes and we need to make sure to push to all of them. You only want to make, just to save yourself time and trouble, don't try to put changes in a different way because you are working with 2 remotes. It can be a little bit finicky. But we have created the assignment. We have Hello Sarah, and again, that's one of the URLs you'll turn in, and then we have the GitHub source. So this is where I can see the source really easily, and this is where I can see your application running. So I look forward to seeing all of your applications, and until our next screencast, I hope you have a great day. Take care.